the June meeting will adopt the planning commission. First order of business is the commission meeting. Pretty much got a copy of that. The edits, modifications. Motion to approve as submitted. On the side. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? All staying not in. Next item you saw, we received electronically, and I believe a copy, updated township open space map. There's been some discussion in the supervisor level about some possible opportunities to acquire some open space that would give us some connections and whatnot. So I talked with Chris yesterday. The process is basically, supervisors will sort that out of how they want to pay for buying it, but it should be the map. Any amendments to the map should be reviewed by Parks and Rec as well as planning commission. So anybody have any comments? I think in general, it's not so much for us to opine on whether they should buy it, but it's consistent with what we see in these community areas. And is there anything left off that you want to?
We had this. They always thought of the Alabac property with the rest of them. Yeah, it looks good. Let's do it.
Yeah, you can see there's a couple of bridge opportunities. So, like, you just need a general endorsement.
So I think the board is looking for an actual recommendation. Because it would be official map amendment.
So,
What part of the red section? That, or would that be?
the lead, so, obviously, gravel, that's a lot of acreage.
Yeah.
Translate acreage to the dollars, so we'll have to, what they want to do, probably announce that was, but this is the map that they would work off of, and then figure out which of those. So a motion to recommend adoption of modified amended Forest Salad open space plan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll move to plan reviews. Isabel's Kitchen.
It's us and Rick.
Where'd he go? Is that okay?
Yeah, he's here. Hang on.
There he is.
Can you hear me? Okay, thanks for accommodating me. I am not near Lower Salford at the time. I'm having a little trouble hearing the planning commission, so hopefully this will go well. So basically, Isabel's Kitchen did a significant expansion a number of years ago, and then more recently has done various small expansions. Generally, they've been approved as waivers of land development. And this is probably, I hate to say this, but probably will be the last of those small expansions. Vince could maybe give a little more detail, but the boiler room and the boiler specifically for this facility is very old, outdated, and it's not functioning very well and needs in dire need of replacement. So the addition of 850 square feet, which is grade on the plan, is to accommodate the replacement of the boiler for the facility. I think the newer boiler requires a little bit larger space, and that's the reason for the addition. All of the proposed building expansion is located in areas that already have impervious cover, so it's not an increase in impervious cover. We're just reconfiguring the parking slightly to accommodate the building. And then we're also proposing to reconfigure an existing sidewalk area that functions as an accessible entrance. So it's not additional sidewalk where there wasn't any before, it's just reconfiguring it to provide accessible entrances. In Michelle's review, she brings up several issues which I want to highlight. The use, food processing use, is a conditional use. A conditional use had been granted in the past, and these prior expansions, I think the township's determination was that an additional conditional use would not be necessary for an expansion because it did not effectively change the use. So we're, I guess, taking the same position here, and that is Michelle's letter, by the way, is dated June 13th, 2025. And that was her first comment. Comment number 2 is just stating that the uses are uses that are allowed within the zoning district. Comment number 3 is with regard to the maximum building dimensions for this building. And I did speak with Mike a little bit about that particular issue prior to the meeting. And I don't know, Mike, whether you had any further discussions after we had spoken earlier today regarding that issue.
Let me interject, Rick. Yes, Mike and I talked, and that comment is going to go away.
Okay. Comment number 4, when the larger expansion was, did somebody ask a question?
No.
Okay. When the larger expansion was approved many years ago, there was an easement provided that would provide access to the neighboring properties if that ever became necessary or desired. So as you come in from Main Street, there's an easement over the driveway, the now existing driveway, and then it goes left and it goes right. The portion that goes right or to the east actually would go through this addition. So our proposal would be to reconfigure that easement so that it could still accommodate the original desire, which would be to provide access to the neighboring property to the east. The owner is actually called Properties of Main Street. So it's still, in our opinion, function the same, but we would have to reconfigure that easement. So that would be our solution to that comment. I don't know whether that will ever come to fruition, but we could still provide it in case that ever arises. I think the remainder of the letter is really a will comply letter. There's a few issues that I need to just confirm with Michelle regarding the actual square footages of each of the uses within the building. There's some of the uses is warehouse use, some of the uses food processing, and some of it's office, and there's a residential portion as well. And that goes to the whole tabulation for parking. We believe in the end that we meet the parking requirement. Very little impact from this small addition, and there won't be any real parking needs. It's not going to result in additional employees. It's just really housing a building, a boiler area. Just so you know, Michelle, we're not proposing any more outdoor lighting other than some lighting over doorways for the boiler room. Comment number 8 on her letter. is deferral of landscape and sidewalk along street frontages where sidewalk does not presently exist. The last waiver that we brought through the township for this property, the planning commission did recommend, and the supervisors ultimately included it in the approval, that there was additional sidewalk added and curbing and widening along School Lane so that the sidewalk would align with the park across the street and the trail that was there. So that those improvements are in the process of being constructed. They're not complete yet, but the curbing, I believe the curbing and the sidewalk and widening are installed. They're just not complete yet. So obviously Vince intends on completing that. So we think that that issue was resolved with the last waiver of land development. So we would continue to request that a deferral of additional improvements be granted at this time. I don't know that I need to discuss any of the remaining comments unless, Michelle, you feel that some of them need to be discussed specifically. I think they're all will comply comments. I don't necessarily see an issue with any of them.
Number 5 in our letter, Rick, we talked about the one addition that hasn't been built yet, a 378 square foot addition. Is that still planned to be constructed? It just hasn't been started yet.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Still will be.
All the plans are still planned to do, and then going back to number 8, you talked about still wanting that deferral of the sidewalk and improvements. I just asked that the planning commission should probably make that part of their recommendation, whether or not they want that. And you also, number 19 in our letter, you talked about the ADA program crosswalk at School Lane. Yes, it is started, and it's been that way for a little while. When will it be finished?
It's done.
It's,
The grass is already this high.
as of 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
The grass is already like that high.
So within the last 2 weeks it was done?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was it.
So. Questions from members? So, Rick, the waiver for the sidewalk, just walk me through that. What's? I'm assuming it's this spot right here, Michelle? School Lane. Right here.
You go up to the top of the plan, it might be easy. So you see.
Yeah, you see where the sidewalk Manus ends, where the parking ends. So that there's probably the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parking spaces was an additional sidewalk area that was added with the waiver of land development that was previously submitted, as well as the handicap ramp and then the crossing that goes to the path across School Lane. So that was what was requested of the project the last time.
They're putting that sidewalk in, what they're asking for a deferral is what Mike is pointing to now, from the end of that sidewalk to the end of their property.
My question doesn't change.
That was my catch-up.
Why would we defer that? Looking at a satellite right now, we've got sidewalk on that side of the road from Cole up to what you've completed. The 2 residents to the west or north of you don't have it, and then it picks up again once you get back behind the dental care. I mean, there's recreational spots, there's, just seems like we should grab sidewalk every time we can on School Lane. It's nothing. I mean, ultimately, it's up to the supervisors, but I think And that would pretty much get us up close to the parking lot across from the hockey rink.
What was-
Other than that, I mean, my only other comment is, this is a great example of why I've been asking for criteria away from the kind. Because, we should understand why we need it and comfort that it's below some threshold of all the field. So that's an agenda topic for later, the president won't have it, so I'm sure.
You said you're starting not specifically what you're doing tonight, but I was thinking previous changes on some property, but it sounds like something was just finished, something's still in the works. And looking at something else, they're always in planning and if these are big picture. This is not big, this is little bits here and there, and I don't know what the history is, but that's.
Should I explain?
So actually, Wilson. So I completely agree with you. Michael, take us through the criteria. One of the criteria is the accumulated amount in the middle of time. I really want to understand that. And the piecemeal approach, whatever the drivers are, I'm sure they're built. But her point is, we keep doing these small incrementals and over time the incrementals add up, whatever the intention is behind it. And we need to figure out how to deal.
And let's do this, and then we bring it back down in pieces.
Which is why we asked.
So make sure
and got the
big picture.
exactly. Right, so, I mean, my preference would be, it's not going before us for land development, so we're endorsing waiver of land development with a common waivers, correct?
That's, yeah, that's generally correct. I mean, you could still pass the motion either way, but one of the things that I'm gonna clarify after this agenda item on the issue is that the terminology is really not appropriate with the way the Lower Southford used the land waiver land development process. It's not really waiving land development. They still need to comply with zoning. They still need to comply with subdivision land development and stormwater ordinance. They still need to rules application for approval and the board's ultimately can be reported. Sometimes land development agreements, they really have to still go through that whole process. Which is another reason why we really wanted to take a look at our processes and.
So my preference would be a motion to support. And that's what's in front of us, so a motion to support waiver of land development. But I would like the comment to include that the supervisors still request the construction of the site. Yep, so yeah.
I need that with you.
I'll say.
Joe,
Addressing our comments also as part of.
yeah, right. And as well as the CPS. All right, so I've got a motion in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, schoolhouse tonight, Susie.
So, submitted revised plans, have a couple new letters, we have a waiver letter, and basically, the items in the letters are all will comply. We're still working through some outside permits, gotta, get our NPDS permit, we're still working with PennDOT. But, at the moment, both of the letters are will complies except for the waiver requests. We submitted a letter that had 3 waivers. And then we recently added 2 additional waivers based on the letters that we got from your consultants. I'll go through the waiver request letter real quick. The first item is the submission of a separate preliminary plan, asking for preliminary final. We're basically finished with planning items and just outside permits. Number 2, which requires curb and sidewalk along all common parking areas. We talked about this one. We have a parking area that is upstream of a detention or basin, BMP, whatever you want to call it these days. And we'd like for that water in the parking lot to kind of sheet flow into the basin. So we do not have curb along that area. And also we are not putting sidewalk in that area because want the water to sheet flow, and there's no need to have sidewalk in that location. It's not going to get us into the building any better. So number 3 requires curb along all existing streets. This is one that was added based on Michelle's letter, Stephanie's letter, curb along Wombold Road. Wombold Road is already widened to the specifications of your ordinance, but it doesn't have curb. And you'll remember we are putting the sidewalk, the trail in. So it is just the curb aspect that we need the waiver for. It's a state road. State roads don't typically like curb. Doesn't help with the drainage in this area. Drainage is fine, so we're asking for that waiver. Number 4 requires a trail or sidewalk along all existing streets. And this one is more of a deferral for the sidewalk along Schoolhouse Road. We had talked about that before. And then number 5 is a new one. Your ordinance requires a type 3, 4, or 8 site element screen for a dumpster area. And that's a combination of a fence and some sort of landscaping. On this property, the dumpster is currently located in a paved area. It is fenced, but the landscaping aspect of it is a little difficult to maintain in a paved area. So that's it for the waivers.
Stephanie?
Yes.
So Stephanie, the curve on Longboat. I mean, Susan saying, typically a state road doesn't do that, the drainage in this area, it's not gonna help with any hindrance. And yet you asked for it, so.
I don't believe we actually asked for it.
So the waiver would be required.
Well, a waiver would be required. I don't believe we actually asked for it, though.
No.
It's simply, Wombold Road is at the cross section that it needs to be at this point for the 309 connector. I think introducing curb along the edge of the shoulder at this point would introduce more drainage structures, pipes, things like that would have to be added. And I'm not sure that we really see the benefit of that at this particular location, provided the trail has adequate buffering between, the edge of pavement and the trail itself. So we were simply saying that a waiver would need to be requested. We were not asking for curb to be installed.
So you support your bond?
Yes.
I think the only, let's see, the only other item I thought we might need to talk about and have you make some comment on is the connection for the sidewalk in Stephanie's letter. Comment 16. Talking about sidewalk connection to the trail. Oh, that's a whole new different one, but I just sent that to you late today. Well, that's another, we were talking about sidewalk along Schoolhouse and where it was gonna go and how it was gonna look, because we didn't think we could get it within the right of way, so we need to provide you with an easement. So you're not asking for that sidewalk, but you're asking for us to grade it. So that sidewalk could go in. So then we needed to figure out where the sidewalk will go to figure out if we need to grade it. In my opinion, grading is not needed over there for that sidewalk. It's pretty flat. And I think you can look at the grades and the contours and see that. And to have to grade in that area doesn't really make sense.
And you can meander around the trees.
We can meander around the trees. Not one tree's gonna come out because we have to get back to the dry, that tree's coming out, but
So you'll replace that.
Oh.
In the future, if you need it.
if the sidewalk moves in anytime soon, sure.
Do you need an easement for the area behind the trees?
We will need an easement because it's in their property,
Right,
yes.
Okay, so you'll provide that
Mhm.
easement.
right, right, right.
Susan, the only location I would ask is that one where the Ben, let me see if I can, this one right in here. You know, I would agree that in general, it's fairly flat out there behind the curb and most, I mean, there's a little bit depending on where you place it. I think there would be a caveat that, you know, if the slope is greater than the roadway slope, then that would have to be addressed, or, you know, it'd have to be compliant sidewalk slope. That area looks like it's a little bit steeper. I literally didn't look at this in great detail since you sent it later today. But the point is I think I generally agree that it is relatively flat. I think that the sidewalk can generally be placed in that location without significant grading, but there may be some tweaking that would need to be done when it was installed.
Yeah,
But the county had comments on connections and crosswalks?
Did, the two comments are about the connection to the trail in front of the building. We didn't see the addition of the potential future sidewalk on Schoolhouse Lane. But just looking at, or Schoolhouse Road, there doesn't seem to be a way to get from the building to the trail walkable, so you're asking that, consider how people would be able to access the trail easily without walking through a grassy area or walking next to the road. And our other comment was related to the crosswalks. I understand that there are two paths that are already there at the intersection, and it looks like there are existing crosswalks, but it would be nice if the crosswalks could be improved, make the streets more visible, and really verify that connection to the trail across the street as well. So if people were gonna walk from the building to the trail on the other side, and they would be able to safely cross.
so I'll tackle the first aspect, the connection from the building to the trail. We do have some drainage and a drainage swale that needs to get the water around from the back of the building into the swale that runs along the road. So a sidewalk from the building to the trail would not be practical in that location. It's not an ordinance requirement to connect that, and these folks, maybe they'll use the trail, and if they do, they can walk in the grass. I mean, it's not that far to get to the trail from the building. The trail currently is just across the front of the property, so they get to the trail to walk across the front of the property. The drainage swale is the problem here to get.
Why?
Yeah.
Just why we say in the letter that we would recommend that the sidewalk along Schoolhouse is installed at this point, or at least a section of it, to make that connection, because I understand that the swale is there in the front and you wouldn't be able to really build something there, but you could connect that sidewalk that around the building on the back side of it to a sidewalk at Schoolhouse, that way. That would be a preferred way to do it. Understand that you're asking for the referral. That would be our.
Yeah, there's folks are there to work, they're not there to walk on the trail.
Stephanie, how about the crosswalk? I mean, I guess I just assumed whatever was there was to.
Yeah.
Hand out specifications, and it's on the road and the connector.
So I guess that's, maybe if you could repeat the crosswalk statement, is it a matter of connecting the trail so it reaches the back of the ramp that's at the crosswalk, or is there an issue with the crosswalks? Because the crosswalks are in place and those ramps were constructed as part of even the other development on the other side of the road. So I don't see why there would be a problem with the crosswalks. What was the?
They are there, but the one on the other side of the road, if you look at the aerial, it looks like it's new paint, and it looks more established than the ones that are existing on the other side of the street that we're looking at. Where they look, and maybe you haven't been out there yourself, so maybe different scenario in person, but
just looking at the aerial imagery, it looks like the sidewalks are really faded and they could be improved.
They're not that old. They were put in a couple years ago. So the full intersection is has crosswalks and ramps, and it was all part of the warehouse development in Towamencin. And that was all updated not that long ago. So I believe they're all up to current standards, as far as that, as far as I'm aware. I know the aerial, when you look on Google and the aerial, it is, the warehouse building was under construction. And so it's not complete when you look on the aerial mapping available, at least available to me. But that project was finished and it should all be up to, it's all up to code to my knowledge.
Recent enough that it would be.
Well,
And
that was my assumption, is that the crosswalks, somebody had signed off on them, and they were what they needed to be. As far as the walkway from the building, I understand the county's statement, if it was a multi-tenant property or residential, I think I'd be, more concerned about this, since it's, owner operator. The employees aren't happy about it, we'll probably cost them. So. Anybody else have any questions or comments? And on the waivers, I think, so on the sidewalk. It seems like there's general assumption that that area is flat and we don't need to be grading. Is that?
Yes.
I'm just looking at the plate. I was actually out there, it's, yeah, it would cause more of a ruckus to go out there to grade for like 3 inches. It's flat basically. And it's nice manicured lawn, trees,
I'd like to see it, but I never saw that plan, you said it yesterday or whatever.
I sent it
Okay.
real late today.
So we need to confirm that, so you
Mhm.
would need to, I believe, make a recommendation as to the deferral, and if you agree to defer that sidewalk, I would ask that you include a condition that, an easement as necessary be provided now.
Speakers don't work.
Yeah, that's the, it's, no. It's a garage, well, it's not,
Yeah, that doesn't scare me,
it's not, I mean, it's silent,
right, as it goes in, that's something
Yeah.
that could be eased.
yeah.
It looks like from here.
So, what about if we do this? So. We all know you're gonna need the easement because of the things you need to have there, so let's just go ahead and get the easement done now. And then defer the grading. Pursuant to confirmation by staff that the existing grade is adequate for future installation. So, it sounds good, but they just got it yesterday, so.
Yep. Sure, well, an hour ago. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? Just regard to the ramp, Susan, I would ask that you just confirm that the 8-foot trail does tie into those back of those ramps appropriately on that corner.
Okay.
I mean, I think we had some ramp, trail design comments in the letter, but I think
Yeah.
that is a something you'll need to check to make sure, that the width of the trail and the width of those ramps are adequate.
Okay. We do have detailed data on that, and I do believe that the width of the landing area was designed to match a trail.
Okay.
So we should be okay.
So motion. Second. Yeah. All in favor? Opposed? So.
Thank you.
Okay. Alright. So I will be as quick as possible, so we have to kind of briefly introduce it at this development. These are the, as of now, just proposed threshold to specify practically nobody except for you here now. I spoke to Joe about it, and Andy Freeman, our township solicitor, actually provided an memo that was completed by one of his colleagues, and so I incorporated that into the memo. Some additional research based upon reaching out to local municipalities. And so all of that's in the memo, and what it all boils down to is we identify the need, and I'm sure many of you can agree that we need to figure out this whole waiver of land development thing. And from my perspective, like I said a moment ago, it's not necessary, the way we're actually currently handling it, it's not necessarily waiving land development, because they still have to go through the entire process. Local municipalities are actually affirming that minor thing, because it does rise to the level of land development, so we have to treat it like a land development, so they have a set of standards and requirements that are less strict than full land development, but it's still called land development, so minor land. Okay, also some municipalities have a threshold that is small enough to not even go through, it doesn't rise to the level of land development, which means it does not meet the definition that the NPC sets forth as it's land development, which is the definition we use. And since it doesn't rise to that level of land development, we can kind of do what we want to do as policy. And so that is the level where if the planning commission and the board of supervisors feel appropriate, where that can just be processed administratively. So they would still need to comply with zoning, it would still need to comply with code, but it would just go through the building and zoning department and the township engineer. Okay, and then they would be issued a grading permit, and they would review it and issue a grading permit and a building permit when necessary.
Would it have to go to us for final?
Not the exemptions, if they're exempted from land development, so those are two thresholds, so every project that comes in, we would measure the building square footage that's proposed and the total impervious surface. If it's more than 5,000 square foot building addition, or more than 10,000 total square foot of impervious surface, then it would be a full land development. If it's less, it would be a minor land development. And if it's less than 2,500 square feet total impervious, it would be handled administrator.
I guess we're going to prevent a situation where the developer comes in or getting back.
We would be adding subsequent years together in order to get that number. So for Isabel's Kitchen, it wouldn't just be the 850 square foot building addition that would be on the table. It would be that plus the other 3 building additions that we just received approval for not long ago. Plus anything else that might have come through within the past. I'm calling it 5 years, but I just put a number down that I
Something like that.
thought that would be appropriate. Go back so long. So we wanted to change the amount of years that.
So. If for minor land development, what wouldn't get done? Why don't you walk us through here's a minor land development, we don't do.
So there has to, so practically speaking, the reason why there's even minor land development process just set the stage is that when developers come in, it doesn't have to be a developer, it could just be a small hometown landowner that happens to own a store. They have a very small improvement that rises to the level of land development because technically it meets the definition, but it's such a small square footage. Is there something that the township can do? Can we expedite the process, or does it have to be so expensive with a fee or something?
Example. Over the year.
Oh, like maybe 1,000 square, like 1,000 square foot building addition. And no additional square footage, all we want to do is small building addition. Is there a less strict process rather than going through preliminary plan, final plan, and then meeting all the required street trees? they have a big property, why are we putting street trees all the way over here and acres away? Because we're doing this 1,000 square foot building addition over here on the other side of the building, like some of this doesn't make practical sense, so our township has developed this waiver of land development pathway, which has always been, from my perspective, kind of faulty, because we never really had a threshold, and we still required them to come through the planning commission, reviewed by CKS when necessary, Bowman, and still have to go through the entire process and be recorded, so what are they actually, and they still would have to pay the land development fees and gas pros, so it's really no different.
But in the hypothetical monument, this, is there a point in that process where the public gets down to the side?
Minor land development?
If somebody's building something, no matter how small it is, it might still have a lot of their own.
So Isabel's Kitchen, if this was adopted, they would be submitted as a minor land development. And it would still be in front of you, just like they were today. Would have to give a recommendation for approval, the public to have the opportunity to speak. It's going through land development. It's all the typical process would still have to happen for a minor land development. Because it's land development. It's just less strict.
So as I'm struggling with mine too is, you know, as you said, it's so small, we'll call it a boiler room. 850 square feet is 42.5 feet long by 20 feet wide, correct? That's half the size of this room. That's that entire wall plus that back wall to the middle of that wall. That's not a bad size, that's bigger than. Exactly. Because if you put a second story on it, you're in 1,800 square foot. My house is not very flat. Right, you know, so that's not that small on a very intensively developed tract in the middle of the village commercial that's already pushing impervious and overall, you know, coverage. So I guess I'm uncomfortable. I definitely want criteria, and 5,000 is the way, but you know, I definitely think we should at least be cognizant of smalls relative to where you're putting it, and who it's surrounded by, and what it's doing to existing thresholds that you know.
So
Imagine if that boiler room was 2 stories high, it'd be really noticeable.
well, then it would be 1,600, 17.
So we're below your 5,000, and from an impervious standpoint, it's only footprint, right?
Yeah, you'd have to clarify that that's footprint, not building floor area.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to be clarified.
Should I write down?
So, yes, so I think, so whatever we come up with, I think it would be appropriate to have a measurable standard, a measurable requirement. So that when the developments come in, we can appropriately analyze it and determine right then and there which category it fits in. So if the 2,500 threshold for administrative, just to take it and run with it and not to bring in land development, if that needs to be lowered, then absolutely let's discuss that, whether or not that needs to be. And then like any sort of, if it's not appropriate in the village commercial district, then maybe we can talk about not allowing minor land development in village commercial zone, and whether or not that would be. Because I mean, that's generally that perspective, but people are close and you have this big building addition right next to you to the neighbor, it's huge, right? So that's huge. So the answer to that might be, rather than restricting it to zoning districts, is bringing down that threshold of what could be handled administratively. So there were several projects that came in that the applicant was asking, this is real small, is it possible to send this just through where you permit application? And
Somebody is enlarging their porch and put.
well, it wouldn't be for residential. Residential, you can do new building conditions, and because they're exempt. Yeah, exempt from the MPC definition.
Some things are very small.
So that's why I went through our entire drawer of waivers of land development. Because these are the case in point. This is when we received word from the applicant or the property owner saying, listen, we gotta do something different here. This is a small project, this is tiny, this is insignificant, can we do something different? Can you guys get say in here? And so that's why we started the waiver land development process. So that's why I listed all of those with my standards. How would it have been categorized? And just to pick some, the columbariums at Southford Mennonite Church, those were only 60 square feet each, just they did. They're very small, could almost just fit on the top of this table. And it's not a building, they're columbariums. And there's a sidewalk around them. It's a very small footprint. And it became right, it's planning commission for land. So something of that caliber, and it's in the middle of the church property, you probably didn't even know. So to your point. But just from a measurable standpoint, it's very small. So would the planning commission even care to see that at planning commission level or not? So that's one example. So it would have been exempt under the criteria that I set forth for the 2,500 square foot threshold. The PVC machines outdoor testing area, if you remember that when it came in, they needed to have testing material outside of their building to come out. It was on existing pavement and it had some awnings for weather protection. No additional impervious, no building, so technically it wasn't a land development. Because it did not meet the definition of land development. But we took them through the waiver land development process, was looking through the whole fees and you guys and the board of supervisors supported the plan. And they didn't really waive land development at all. And so that would have just gone, not even a grading permit, it just would have been a permit for the building zoning department to install the facilities and volume and put down your construction.
Yeah, places where it's not a building. You know, I think we can easily see our way to defining criteria that we said straight. The American one, that was almost all part of the landscape. Part of the property. And the community there. But on the flip side, that pavilion, you know, that's 8,000 square feet of impervious, and yeah, I love South Meadow, but when we look at that pavilion, if that pavilion had hard walls, and those kitchens were warming kitchens, but were full kitchens, that same square footage, that same footprint starts to look like some sort of social hall, and now you gotta start asking all sorts of questions about parking, handicap parking, lighting, sidewalks, to get people from the parking lot into the social hall, you know, so how do we rationalize?
So right now, the thought is only by square footage and only by whether or not it's a building. So if they came in for the enclosure of that building, whole different story. That's a much bigger building than what is fully enclosed right now. What was proposed was only the full kitchen and bathrooms and some storage, and then a much bigger open building, which is but
Doesn't affect, but people who see it, they're not really impervious to this. And in my mind, that's just.
So I know what you're saying, from a strict read of the zoning ordinance. The amount of parking that's required is based upon parking inside a building. And the building was defined as 4 walls in our zoning ordinance. So from a zoning perspective, it would not have that. Even though people can use it, it's not as they would use it building. All the way through here, would only be weather permitting. So,
But I think tagging on to Julia's point, that zoning of the land development and whether we want that to be a transparent public process with comment and review, I think we can distinguish between, because what you're saying, if I heard, I'm gonna say it back to you, you tell me if I got it right. If we only wanna make it based on interior square footage. Something like Kirschner's down in Skipback, where the expectation was most of those people were sitting outside. You wouldn't be thinking about it because you would say, well, the internal space is only X. And, you know, how many people are gonna be parking, where are the cars gonna be, the sidewalk and the lighting, noise and the neighbors and all that stuff, I mean. I think from what this goes through land development, I think we can think a little differently with this term.
Let me give you an example, thank you, you're very helpful. When I looked through it, I'm thinking all those things were exempt, they should be exempt. From that middle column. I was thinking maybe the middle column was. The criteria were small,
so
and then they.
let me just so I understand. The middle column is still laid out. It would still come in front of you guys, the public would still be able to.
So the difference would be.
opine. The differences are, I list some differences, and I just threw them down as potential options. Because there really should be a measurable difference between a full lane development and a minor lane development, if there is an actual difference, right? If there's an actual difference by having less of a benefit to go to minor lane development. So all the ones in the middle column would still have to go through full gauntlet of land development. It's just abbreviated, less expensive, and less requirements. What I list as the requirements that would not be upheld, so not required, would be the preliminary plan process, so which the process as a minor subdivision, so it's just preliminary, it's final without the fees and ask for a waiver from that section of ordinance, it would just not be required. I have here road improvements like widening or curbs, sidewalks.
So I'm right where you are, so for everybody else. Column 1 would go through full land development, column 3 would be exempt. I'm good with both of those. It's how we treat the ones that are in that middle column, which is what Mike's laying out on page 306. Interestingly enough, Mike, based on what we saw tonight, sidewalks, I don't think should be allowed.
Okay.
I think I talked about it.
Yeah.
Maybe street trees, at least to me, when I'm doing the waiver of land development review, I look at widening curve, what do you, the 2, 3, 4, you list that. Widening and curve, are they necessary? Are they part of a bigger plan for the township? Street trees, although Mike says replacement trees and parking lot trees would be required, street trees to me are more of a township-wide improvement. Yeah, benefit, not that replacement trees are, but like I'm saying, and then sidewalks, like you said. Case in point is tonight with Isabel's kitchen.
And even on the southward one of the pavilion, now, to their credit, they were proposing sidewalks to get people from the church
Right.
up to that pavilion, but if not, I would go into talking about that.
So they
Wouldn't want people walking through the park.
So then they would be required, that's a good example, because that's a big property, kind of like Covenant Presbyterian. They would be required to put in that sidewalk along for Sacramento. They would be required to put the sidewalk along Indian House Road, and don't they have frontage along Harleysville Pike? Do they not? No, it does not go, there's a farm there. Okay, right. So but they have a long frontage on Meeting House. So they would have to put in that sidewalk in all the streets along.
To me, it would be a requirement unless waived by the planning commission and the board.
So you're saying that if something is questionable, then you still have to come in front of the board. But was it questionable from that over interior, are you exempt? We wouldn't even see it.
Right, if it's in the exempt column, they still need to comply with all township code,
We wouldn't see,
you guys would,
if it's in the middle, we would,
so,
might be a chance we didn't see.
right. So my question.
But then you're saying I can go tell
But that, right, okay.
No, the
So-
public will tell.
So I just want to press the thought and discussion. So there. Again, back to the reason, like, there needs to be a difference between a minor and a full.
Yeah.
So are there any ideas to, or does the planning commission overall think that there should not be a minor land development and everybody rise to the level of land development? You just have to go to land development? Or do you guys have any ideas of what not to automatically require for minor land? Again, with the understanding that within the last like 5 years or whatever here established, you guys want to come up with, we're still adding up all of the previous minor land developments together to put it into a category.
I'm cool with having that category. As an option, just haven't got my mind around. Size requirements, that we should put in.
And Michelle, I hear what you were saying, so in my mind, sidewalks, I definitely want to keep on the list. Buffers, because then we see what it is that they're doing, how in the case of landowners, should be something that we refine on. I'm okay with combined preliminary final. You know, I think that's reasonable for land development. And for road improvements, that's the one that I'm struggling with, Michelle, because to your point, hey, maybe we missed it last time and now here's the chance. But if it really does meet minor, like, then you turn around and say, we're gonna ride the road front because you're putting in 800 square feet like that,
I
that's.
understand.
That's gonna go very.
Yeah.
So good with the preliminary. Good with, and want to keep the sidewalks and buffers on, street trees on indifferent. The road improvements on probably the other way.
So still requiring vote for not requiring.
But the line is fine, but
But you gotta skip 5,000 square feet.
And it's fine. I mean, think about, you know, you don't want to ask the road for that's what size building. Or did not. I think good with them. So there's not an impact on the roads.
they're about 1,000 square feet. That's a decent sized building, plus some parking, so I like that, that's a. Depending on what.
That's the school, that's the Indian Valley Middle School. What's the Scotia? I mean, they just would have been cleaned. And if we would have had this threshold, they might have considered to go back to the drawing board to get it under 5,000, if 5,000 would be established.
Cause I'm thinking like that RO district off of, I'm sure, where Dracus, you know, like. Some of those were probably close to being under 5,000, but we really wanted to figure out how to interconnect those parking behind there.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Right, so, yeah. Oh, they had to go through regular land development for. County. You mean the one that's to the left of,
The one that's on.
Well, if you had 5,000, then
as a standalone building? As a standalone principal building, you're required, no matter what the square footage is required. This would only be for building additions. And accessory.
But you've got projects that come in. Where it's an older property structure, but you're not going in, that's a. Those will be on them. They're coming in for something that's not very big. But that's not 2% houses, so they're being up to speed. And that's so they'll have to be minor.
So if it's outlined as not being required per code, you have less language. So that's where if the planning commission feels it appropriate that. We address that through requirements, then that's the time to do it, or things that didn't code that's not compliant.
The only other thing I'm thinking of is the exempt column, is that the change in use, when you have a change in use, like Drake has converted that existing garage into office space. It was a garage, now it's office, it needs more parking. Which needs stormwater management, which I review anyway, I'm thinking of this out loud. Maybe another dumpster, buffering, landscaping, which we said it would include, it's the only thing I'm also thinking about. Should that really be exempt if there's a change in use?
So currently, the change in use is handled administratively as it works this way. Somebody moves in and out of the Meadowbrook Plaza, which is the empty shopping center. And they can just move in and out, changing use.
It's the same use.
Out. Well, a shopping center, they have to meet the set of the uses that are set up.
That are allowable, that, yeah.
So you're right, it was only the umbrella that it's a shopping center use primarily. But even in, say, let's works, it's the old White Works building. Many uses have been in and out. As long as the use does not require additional parking, then we would not bring it to land development for a waiver of land development. If whatever they were proposing required half or less parking than what they already have, then it would just be a use and occupancy. Make sure it's safe within a building, make sure it complies with zoning, and move on, because no proposed improvements would be required, which means that it doesn't rise to the level of development for us to see.
And especially if I'm using Drakus again, I'm just thinking if there were residents around that. And we had it, he had a garage and now he's making that into an office, people surrounding that might have more of a say about it.
That's
Not
it,
care
that
about
would
that.
have to come in where you're worrying about.
Why? It's
Because
exempt.
that was a garage that was attached to the existing principal building. So
Okay.
attached garage,
Right.
which meant that the proposed office was an extension of the existing building.
Right, but it's a
Not a
change.
not a standalone accessory building, so.
No,
it was
I
a
understand.
Accessory garage, referring to an office that would have to go.
But in this case, like I'm saying, if there were residents around it and he's changing the garage, even though it's connected. Into an office use, the surrounding residents might care.
Yeah, but look, zone residential. That was, you're saying that you have residents around it, so
Right.
are you talking about in the residential area?
There might be VC, which you could allow low,
Or RO.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't really think about this a lot, but it's just something to think about.
So, like, as Julia's done really good work and laying it out for us like this,
Yes.
I think it's really helpful. That middle, that minor land development, I think we can tweak what are the elements that they don't have to go through. But I think we're almost there, so if you can help us just get that finished up. And then I think we need a threshold less than 5,000 square feet. And just for everyone's edification, if I'm reading this correctly, Isabel's Kitchen did 3 projects totaling 3,800 square feet. And then this latest project comes in at 850. So they're now at 4,650. They've done 4 projects. But we're still below 5,000 square feet. He's just piecemeal his way through the process.
Right, so this would be like a case in point where if he comes back in a couple of years. With something else small and say it's 2,000 square feet. It's just a minor land development. But no, since we're adding the previous years to it, it has to rise to the level. Then you add everything together and whatever we did not require. Would then be back on the table and required for the whole thing. So the street trees will be back on the table for the whole development, for the whole, all of the.
So you're saying 5 years, or if it's back 7 years?
Well, that's the threshold that I think that the planning commission can recommend changing that threshold, deciding that it's 10.
How far back did you go? I know you said you did the drawer. Is this 10 years worth of information or is it 20 years?
It's probably closer to.
15 years, okay.
That's just a guess, but
No, we didn't start doing that more until probably about 7, 8 years.
So if you could say anything from 2015 on, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
oh, like no. No limit to the,
number of years, yeah.
well,
Right.
because I opened up quite a few very old drawings.
Uh-huh.
And some of them were like 20 or 30 years, so.
But they weren't waiver land developments, were they?
No,
Because,
no, not
yeah.
really. I just mean like, if there's a building addition that was added 20 years ago. Does the planning commission want
Oh.
that to be added to an 800 square foot building addition?
I just,
Right,
just looking down, I think anything that was granted a waiver of land development within a certain period of time, you add them all together. Because I think, I forget when I started here in 2014 maybe, we didn't have any waiver of land developments. They seem to be coming in a lot more recently. I know.
So Joe's lobbying for easy math, let's go with 10 years. That way we just look at the calendar, we go back 10 years and,
rolling 10 months, about 10 years.
and then on the aggregation or the square footage, whether it's aggregation or the one-off. I'm thinking 2,000, 2,500, something in that realm.
I'm sorry, which threshold?
The square footage,
For
For-
maximum square footage?
yeah,
Gotcha. So instead of, okay, so it needs to be, I think 2,000. Okay, so then the exemptions would be much less than 2,500, because that's what I have. with that. So. What do you think for the exemptions, looking on the list that I have right now, is 7,500.
I'm just gonna write a suggestion out here. We're, as Mike said in here, we're looking at the stormwater ordinance, which you should have before you, at your August meeting. I forget right now what criteria we're putting out there for you, but it might be like 1,500, maybe it doesn't have to stay at 1,500, but maybe we can add those two requirements.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah, okay.
Now to be clear, in any circumstance, even if it's exempt, well, it will still need to apply with stormwater management and EMS conservation commissioner.
Well, you do. The for example, probably use something like correct, and then use a 25 or column. But.
1,200 for exempt and 2,500 for the.
I do agree with that, but. That's.
The other townships certainly seem to be more in the 5,000 range. Now that you've got village commercial. Okay.
Be careful about all this.
And a lot of municipalities do have a higher threshold for with minor land development, probably above or lower south of the. Right, but they also have, in some instances, they'll have other qualifications about, like the proposal can't have any extension of sewer lines, they put other requirements like that, so in addition to having size restriction, it might also have other restrictions upon. They can have certain types of.
What I gave like some early thoughts, I was one of the ones clear that I had included was Scott down. Show me that it can be served by the existing utilities or sewer electrical is so great, but if you've got to bring in, new fees for any of those, then you must be doing an expansion beyond your existing
So I will redo the memo. What number should I use as the? This isn't what the planning commission wants to move forward with, but just for me to redo the memo so we can reanalyze what. The whole thing together, what threshold should we use for the maximum minor planning bill?
So, this nice round numbers, big which are below 1,000 square feet. Exempt,
Okay,
between 1,000 and 2,500, minor, over 2,500, 4.5. And if we need to tweak that, if Michelle comes back with the, who's showing the ordinance thing.
so that's 2,500 square foot of all floors of the building. So the $10,000, I'll take that down to. I'm sorry, per feet. I'll take. I'll take that down half, down to 5 or.
You're doing the building plus impervious.
All impervious, so it would just be a footprint, so all the impervious, no matter how high a building is, all of the impervious together.
The parking spaces,
But you took them from 5,000.
Yeah, double, yeah, 25 years of fall.
To 5, okay. All right, do. Thank you.
and we'll talk about this again next month,
Yes,
so we can think about it.
well, it'll be all.
Right.
That extra 3 weeks to work on. Yeah, so just a reminder, everybody, August 13th was the date that we picked. Any other? You stuck around, sir, any comments or questions?
I thought that was a great discussion. I love listening and seeing how you guys kind of work out all these details. That's great.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll send you.
All in favor?
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, have a good night.
Steph, is it hot in Texas?
I think it was hotter